everyone, and welcome to another installment of Claris Engage Beyond, featuring Robert Holsey, Claris product owner. I'm your host, Janine Campbell, and I'm thrilled to be with you all today. Thanks for joining us. Just as a reminder, the information shared today is for your informational purposes only. And additionally, we want to make sure you have the best viewing experience possible during today's WebEx. If you click on the layout button at the top of the WebEx screen, there are a lot of different options for how to view our presenters and speakers and content today. So feel free to click around there. If you don't want to see participants without video, we recommend that you turn that toggle off. And if you have any technical issues at any time, contact WebEx technical support. Additionally, we will have time for questions and answers during today's session. So to submit your question, you simply open the Q&A panel at the bottom of the window, submit your question, and our panelists will be happy to answer as many questions as time allows before the end of our session today. And with that, it is my pleasure to pass the virtual microphone to my friend and colleague, Robert Holsey, who has a great presentation for you all today. Robert, thank you for sharing this awesome information with our community and a peek inside the future of the Claris platform.
Thanks, Janine, and hello, everyone. It is wonderful to be back. Again, I'm Robert Holsey, a product owner here at Claris, and I am very excited to be able to share with you a little bit more about the new stuff that we introduced at the keynote just a few months ago. So today, we'll be talking about that new stuff, giving you an overview of sort of the what and why, talk a bit about our guiding principles as we embark on this journey, and then how this might start rolling out to you and what you'll see in your hands. I will then give a sort of sneak peek, early look at a demo of where we are today, and then finally be joined by Peter Nelson, our VP of Engineering, to answer some of your burning questions. So with that all said, let's jump in and first talk about what is this new stuff I'm referring to. Now, if you did not have the opportunity to see the keynote from Brad and Pete and others from us here at Claris, I highly recommend you go and check that out on our YouTube page. But here are the big takeaways regarding the new stuff. First is that this is a new tool that is going to allow you to create beautiful modern apps and deploy them in a web browser. And equally as important, it's also a new development environment, also in a web browser. Now, this is a departure for us here at Claris. You know, for a long time, FileMaker Pro has been the only development environment, whether you're building for the desktop, mobile, or web. But with this new stuff, we have an opportunity to take the lessons learned from 35 years of developing on FileMaker and apply it to a new environment that's purpose-built for creating wonderful modern apps in a web browser that takes advantages of the capabilities of modern web browsers today. This new stuff is also built on a new tech stack, and we talked about this a little bit at the keynote, and we talked about the fact that we're building on top of proven technologies, frameworks like React, backends like MongoDB. And that's important for you to understand because it helps build the confidence in this platform. You know, as you're pitching to customers, you can use these as examples of why you can trust Claris. But what I want you to understand is that this is not something, you know, these technologies that we mentioned are not things that you need to go and learn about, right? You don't need to be a React developer or a Mongo admin. We are going to be doing all the heavy lifting there, and that's going to be transparent. But understanding that we're standing on top of those technologies is useful. And then finally, everything that we talk about with this new stuff is really designed to extend your existing FileMaker solutions. You know, there's going to be situations where absolutely new projects will come up and it will work, or using this new stuff will satisfy those requirements, in a lot of cases exceed what you would be able to accomplish from a visual standpoint on the FileMaker side. But in a lot of cases, it's going to be used to augment solutions that you've already created. Now, why are we doing this? And I hope that there's no real controversy on this slide. But we do want to highlight, you know, our thinking here. We're always up for challenge. You've got an opportunity later on this call. If you've got anything you see that you disagree with or think that we're missing, now's a great time to raise it. But the first challenge that we're trying to overcome is, again, this modern UI. You know, what we're seeing, what we're hearing is that as we're building apps today and pitching them to colleagues or to new customers. No matter how powerful and capable the app is, it's being judged by its visuals and its look and feel, which makes getting this into the hands of the people that need it more challenging. Another impediment here is deployment and maintenance. Again, if you've built the perfect tool for a business, it doesn't matter if you can't get it into the hands of the folks that need it most. And so this is where deploying through a web browser gives you that opportunity to get into where they're living most of their time and in a web browser. That's not to say that there won't be scenarios where native clients are still important, and absolutely we believe there will be. But if you can first reach them in a very lightweight method, like in a web browser, and you can prove the value of this platform, the idea of downloading and installing software is no longer going to be a challenge because they're going to be bought in at that point. And then scale and performance is sort of twofold. Obviously, anything that you build, you want to be performant and scale. But again, as you're pitching this platform to a colleague or to a customer, understanding that it's going to be able to grow and meet the needs of your future business just like it can today is critical. And here is an example of why understanding the frameworks and technologies that we're building on top of is useful, because again, that helps bolster that confidence in what you're building. And then if we do all that right, we expect that we're going to be able to start attracting new developers. And I don't mean just new customers to Claris, but new developers to the community that are coming with fresh perspectives, new ideas. They're helping bolster this community even further, the one that we know and love. So again, as we're going down this journey and building this new stuff, there are a few guiding principles that we keep in mind. And this is evolving, but these are ones that have been consistent from the beginning. And the first one is delightful design. We all spend a lot of our lives in the tools that we use for work. And so we believe deeply that these tools should be things that you want to interact with, that you enjoy using. And so making sure that it's a delightful experience is center to what we're building. Progressive discovery is interesting because I'm sure that many of you remember fondly your experience early with FileMaker. You started when FileMaker was simpler. It solved simpler problems, but they were important problems, and they were ones that got you excited and took you down the journey that you are on today. And as we added complexity to the product, things like web viewers and script triggers, those were incremental enhancements that you were able to pick up and learn as you went. But if you're brand new to the platform today, you're being greeted with all of that complexity up front, and you've got to try to figure out what's the important elements of it. And then even for the folks, those of us that know FileMaker really well, and know what all the pieces do, you still have to kind of slog through those pieces to get to the things that are most important. And so how do we take this and make it powerful out of the box and approachable, but then still have that ability to sort of peel back the layers, get to that complexity when necessary, so that we don't lose the real magic of FileMaker today, which is the spaces where we can apply our creativity to solve interesting problems. And then encourage creativity. This one's a little tougher for us to sort of come up with a specific phrasing for a slide. So let me talk about it a slightly different way. Today, we love FileMaker because it allows us to build anything, right? I mean, what we hear all the time is the love around the fact that you can always say yes to any challenge put in front of you. And that's great. We take a lot of pride in that. And that's key to the spirit of this new stuff that we're building. But the flip side to that is that you have to build everything. Every pixel, every screen, every script, everything is something that you have to build. Now, there absolutely are tools and approaches to help mitigate this. Our add-ons and templates and practices that you all have developed over the years to offset that. But how can we do the heavy lifting so that the time that you're spending is not just pushing pixels around on a screen or writing the same script for the 100th time? Those elements will be taken care of for you, and you can then take your incredible talents and creativity and apply it to new interesting challenges. So I wanted to give an example of this, and these concepts. And I have to say, capturing delightful in a slide is pretty tough. And we're not really where we want to be yet there anyway. But when we talk about progressive discovery and encouraging creativity, I chose to use the example of conditional formatting because most apps require it in some format. And we can provide you an easy-to-use interface that covers probably 90% of the use cases that you'll need conditional formatting. And taking that a step further, having built in, whether it be objects or, maybe when you create certain entity projects, like an inventory, low inventory turns red automatically, or if you've got a field that's required that's not filled out, have that turn red automatically. So we're doing, again, a lot of it by default out of the box. You can come in here and tweak numbers in a no-code, very simple, approachable way. So again, that solves about 90% of the challenges, but what about that next 10%? Well, that's where you can take what you've built from the GUI interface and drill down a level into a formula that is built up by the UI, so it's already there for you to sort of add on to. And you've been doing these kinds of things with scripting and calculations in the past. But the fact that you can sort of build off of what the GUI had created for you gives you that next little step, one less thing that you've got to build from scratch. And this, between the no-code, GUI interface that you're leveraging and this approachable formula low-code language, you're, again, solving about 99% of the challenges that you might face. But what about that last 1%? That 1% that could make or break an experience. That today, if you're really trying to go after it, I've seen things like taking a web viewer and using that to take over the page, which means you're throwing away anything that you've created object-wise, fields on the layout, any of the UI that you may have used for conditional formatting. You're essentially starting from scratch, writing your own HTML, JavaScript to get that last little piece. And it's great that you have that affordance, but it's not great that you've got to, again, start from scratch. So what if we could take going from the GUI interface dealing into this, this formula, what if we could peel this back a little bit further? And I want to stress this is just an example. We're not married to this. It's more about the concept of what if we allowed you to go in and edit, let's say, JavaScript directly. And so you're building on top of what you've already created with our low-code language and our UI interface, and you're adding just that last little bit. And I understand that not everyone knows JavaScript, and that's fine. There's going to be lots of folks in the community that have this capability. Of course, again, 99% of the cases are going to be solved without JavaScript. But I think there's a lot of value in knowing that you have that safety valve, that if you do need to accomplish something and you can't through the interface, there is likely a way that you can through these other hooks. So I'm anticipating a little bit what the next question here is. We've heard lots of excitement since the keynote about when this thing is coming. And I'm not answering that today, and we're not ready. But I do want to talk about how we are going to start building value and how you might see this start rolling out. So you may have seen a slide like this before. It's used by companies like Spotify to talk about their agile transformation. And it tells a pretty typical story, right? You've got a customer request, in this case, to build a car. So you go off and build it, starting from the ground up. And during that time, you have nothing of use to the user. You can't get any feedback from them. It's not until you have the car completely finished that you hand it off to them. And it probably satisfies their initial requirements, but not to the degree that it could have potentially achieved those requirements. And you probably have felt this before as well. If you're a developer and you've had customers ask for things, you've gone off and tried to solve it in isolation versus the more iterative approach, you've probably felt the difference between those two. So we're moving away from this. You've heard us talk quite a bit about our agile transformation. I'm not going to go into too much more detail about that, other than the fact that it allows us to deliver value more like this, where instead of starting from the ground up, where you don't have any value until you're finished, we can start exposing smaller elements that have value, that do a job well, that doesn't do all the things that you may want, and that's fine. It's going to solve some of those challenges, and some people are going to be able to use it, and they're going to be giving us feedback. And with each iteration, we're going to get stronger, learn more, and come to a better outcome. And as we do this, again, it's important to know that we understand that this first version is not going to solve every challenge you may have. But as we iterate here, at some point in the line, you're going to see projects come up that you say to yourself, okay, I can absolutely use FileMaker to do this, or I can leverage this new stuff, and I can do it quicker, and I can do it with a beautiful modern interface. So let's go down that route. And that's great, but I actually think there's something more interesting here, which is that you and I are not the only ones represented in this slide. Imagine that today you had someone come to you and using this analogy, and it could be a colleague or a customer, and they need a bicycle built. Well, you have two options. The first is say no, which probably means that that person is not your biggest fan. They still have a problem, so they're going to try to figure out how to solve it somehow, and that's probably not going to be the best way to solve it. They may find some other software that they think is good enough and start promoting that within the organization. Or you say yes, you put it on your backlog, and you get to it eventually. And I'm guessing that building a bicycle is probably not all that interesting to you. You've probably built it 100 times in the past or some version of it. So now you're taking time, your precious time on something that's not all that interesting, and more importantly, taking you away from the real challenges that you could be tackling. So instead of that, if we have this new stuff and it's at a point where it can build a bicycle, you can then hand that person this tool and tell them to build it. And then some really interesting things happen. First off, obviously, they get their problem solved. And so, they're very likely to be be excited about Claris and be another ally in an organization for you. They've also taken it off your plate. So again, you're spending your time on things that are more valuable. And then also, I'm betting that as they're building this, at least some of them are going to realize that they enjoy building the bicycle more than riding it, much like many of us have. And now we've got someone that's probably going to become a new developer and start again bringing fresh ideas to the community. So this is why we think this is really interesting, approaching it this way. And again, I'm going to try to anticipate a question, which probably is, okay, great. So what's our skateboard? And I'll be honest, this isn't 100% defined, but I can talk to you about, what our thinking is right now. We have talked to many of you, listening to what is working well with FileMaker, where it's not, where WebDirect is, a good fit, and where we've got some gaps. And a use case bubbled up that was really interesting because it's one that isn't solvable easily with FileMaker. We think we can accomplish it much better, and it gives us the building blocks to be that sort of first amount of value that we may be able to deliver to you. And that use case is doing data collection of external users. So this is where you're reaching out to your customers' customers. Think about student registration at the beginning of the school year, or event RSVPs or surveys. Essentially, anytime you want to collect data from someone that's not within your organization and have that fed into a FileMaker solution to then do whatever with, right? Create reports or what have you. And you really have three options today. And none of them are great fits. Of course, you can use WebDirect, and in some instances, that is a great solution, and it works well. But if you're trying to, maybe be exposed on a website, where you're, again, reaching out to your customer's customer, they probably have certain expectations that they want to present themselves with to customers. And of course, if you've got a scenario where, you've got 2,000 students signing up over the course of a weekend, WebDirect just wasn't built for those types of use cases. So alternatively, you may leverage a third party, and many of you are doing that today. And that works, but of course that means extra moving parts, additional licensing, more things that could go wrong. So I think we can do better there. And then finally, obviously, you could just build your own, right? Write everything from scratch, or pay, I suppose, someone to do it for you. But this is something that's been done hundreds of times before. It's not an interesting problem. And again, it just feels like time wasting. So what if we could create something that solved that problem really easily, efficiently, with a beautiful interface, that fed directly into FileMaker. And if we relate something like that, what that would do is one, give you some value, right? You have an additional tool in your toolbox to solve challenges. We're learning along the way, which ends up resulting in better outcomes. So that's kind of the thought process. And what I'd like to do now is give you a sneak peek at where we are at the moment. This is still early days, but this gives you a sense of sort of how we're focusing on these types of problems. So what you're seeing on screen here is a app that I just created, a blank app. I am running on a live system, so if everyone could just take a moment, little prayer to the demo gods for me, I'd appreciate it. But with that said, what I'm going to go here and do is pretend that I am a developer with a customer that just came to me and said that they need a registration where someone will put in their name, email address, phone number, tell them a little bit about themselves, and then agree to a waiver before finally seeing a confirmation page with some additional information. Okay, pretty simple requirements. But I hope that you are doing the mental math right now of what you would have to go through to build that today, because I'm pretty confident that I'm going to be able to blow those expectations away. So here we've got the ability to create a new workflow. And again, we're focused right now on data collection. So when I create this, it's just going to create one for me automatically where I can see I've got a couple of pages defined already, a registration page and a confirmation. So this is a great starting point. But my requirements include an additional page for signing a waiver. So let's go ahead and add that, and we'll say, call this waiver. So now I've got my 3-page structure, and I can drill down into the registration page. And again, we've got some stuff that's already pre-defined for me. I got a first name, last name. I actually think this will look better next to each other. And then we can add a phone number and email address. And then for the description, we'll use a long text. And I'll pause here for a moment because I hope you picked up on something really important, which is that as I'm defining this, I never took the first step that we typically take at FileMaker, which is let's start with schema, let's define a table, let's start defining fields. I know that feels natural. We've all been trained to do it for a long time, but the way that we're building this, that's not actually necessary. I've just come in here and I can start dragging fields onto my page, and we are handling the schema behind the scenes. In fact, I didn't even have to set the names of anything. I had out of the box good names and placeholders in most cases. This is the first instance where, hey, long text isn't really a good descriptor of what I want. I want them to tell us about themselves. So, yourself. And then I can just simply tab and go into the placeholder text. Enter your details here as an example. Don't have to go into menus. I don't have to go find anything. It's all right there in line. So that looks good. Let's now come over to our waiver, and we'll just name this waiver. And I want to add some text here, so let's do a text block. And the thing that they're agreeing to is you will give us your firstborn child. Cool. And then to make sure they agree to that, let's add a checkbox and say, do you agree? And, a waiver, it probably is something that we want to make sure that they sign. So let's go in and make this a required field. And then on the last page, just add some additional text. Let's say that you will receive an email. Okay. So now I've got my 3 pages configured and set, and then I can go ahead and publish. What you're seeing now is sort of a preview of what the end user would end up seeing. And just a quick reminder, everything that you're seeing right now is in a web browser. So the development I just did, and now the actual consumption or data entry also in a browser. We did a lot of the heavy lifting as far as just placing of objects and pixels and things of that nature, but there's also a lot of other things that are built in that you just get part of these as part of these objects. So as an example, if I'm filling in my name here, because we know that this is a name field, we can tap into the OS's contact info and fill in your work info and have that automatically populate fields as an example. Or automatic masking of numbers. So if I go in here and I type in a phone number, and let's say I don't type it in all the way and I tab out, automatic conditional formatting where we're showing you, hey, in red, there's something that's not filled in here, and I can go in and address that. And then for the tell us more, as I enter information like I am a huge crush span, you'll notice that that field grows. It pushes other objects down the page for you automatically, and all that information is easy for me to read. I can hit next. I see my waiver. If I don't check this and try to hit submit, again, you see that things turn red. I can hit agree, hit submit, and then my data has been collected and I will receive an email. And if I come back in here, I can see and view that data, that information has been collected. And at this point, depending on the use case, this might be enough. If you're just doing an RSVP, you want to see who's coming to an upcoming party or event, you can look through this. But more than likely, what you're going to want to do as the next step is hook this into a FileMaker solution. And we don't have that wired up yet, but the idea is that this data would show up in your FileMaker solution just like any other table occurrence that you could then build layouts and scripts on top of. Okay, so that is a quick preview of sort of what we're working on now. And in recap, this new stuff that we're working on is a new consumption data entry as well as authoring environment. We're building on top of proven frameworks that's going to help us meet modern needs, attract new developers into the community. We've designed this to be delightful, be something that does the heavy lifting for you so you can focus your creativity on the things that matter. And our plan is to roll this out in stages of value to incrementally build up to where we're heading. And with that, I would like to now invite Peter Nelson, our VP of Engineering, to the stage to answer your questions, as well as special guest Wesley Powell that will help be our MC for this Q&A section.
Pete and Robert, I have your first question for you.
Okay.
From the audience. I keep hearing you can use FileMaker or the new stuff. Will this be a separate product?
FileMaker and the new stuff. I think the most important thing to keep in mind as you watch presentations like this one, if you go and watch the keynote, and as I read through a bunch of the questions here about, okay, but this isn't nearly as powerful for me as FileMaker was. This isn't something that we are promoting instead of the FileMaker platforms. This is a product that you use along with FileMaker to build out your solution. It is better at building certain portions of solutions like anonymous data gathering that Robert just showed you than the FileMaker platform is. And it will continue to get better in certain areas. FileMaker is going to be better in certain areas. If you watch the keynote, if you watch the Ask Me Anything, though, what you'll see is these platforms allow you to see, allow you to share data into the same backend. So your FileMaker solution can leverage all of the data gathered in the anonymous data solution that Robert just put together. They're tools that are designed to be used together.
Thanks, Pete. Kind of a related question. Is there a migration path for existing FileMaker solutions into this new tech stack?
So again, this is a tech stack that wants to be used along with your FileMaker solution, not instead of FileMaker. So day one, there's not an expectation that people migrate their FileMaker solution into this new world. Not at all. There are going to be things that the new world is better at and more tuned to supporting than FileMaker. So use it for those things. For those things that FileMaker is more appropriate for, use FileMaker. The beauty is the data will be shared.
And expanding on that thought, a question from the audience is, what is being done for applications that need to have an offline component? For example, oil fields, disaster recovery areas, other remote locations.
Two things. One, we're aware of the need, aware of the value. There are absolutely things that we can build out on top of this new platform to support those sorts of deployments. They won't be there day one, though. So again, use FileMaker.
And speaking of the FileMaker, will the standalone native client stay around and improve?
Yeah.
Can you talk about more about features and this new experience we just saw? Will we be able to integrate this web content into existing websites without external URLs and so on?
That's an interesting question. I'll be honest, I haven't, and I don't think anybody here has really thought about exactly what that would take and what it would look like. So it's not a high priority ask from the product org right now or anything like that. When I think about how it all works, I don't really see any problem with integrating it with external websites, though. Yeah, I would expect you're able to.
Great. Going back to the demo, all of this looks great, and it sounds like a massive undertaking that may take years to get something that is mature as what we have now with the FileMaker platform. Any ideas on how we're going to bridge the gap between that mature product experience 2 to 3 years from now and what we have?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I think that baked into the question is the assumption that this replaces FileMaker. And I would reiterate that this is going to allow you to create applications designed for web deployment, first and foremost. And that's where this community should think about this product living naturally for the next few years. So I expect FileMaker and this new stuff to work hand in hand for a number of years to come.
And then maybe a two-part question here. Will this new experience be cloud only, or will it also be available on-prem? And can you talk more about where the cloud only is hosted?
It absolutely will support on-prem deployment. Architecture is defined for that now. It may not roll out day one supporting on-prem deployment just because we have to prioritize something. And so we're going to prioritize cloud hosting first. There's nothing proprietary about the way we are standing up the cloud hosting right now. So at the moment, it's all being built to run in Google's compute platform. But there's nothing keeping us from running it on AWS or on, home rolled server farms, etc.
Great. Going back to kind of the integration between FileMaker and the new stuff, can you give more details of how that data exchange? Is there a bidirectional push and pull, if you will, between experiences?
It's more a shared data repository. Again, if you watch the keynote, I think that's the best explanation that you'll find at a high level of what we're planning. But FileMaker is being modified to be able to, if you want it to, read and write data natively from this new file-based Mongo store in the cloud. So you'll be able to build a solution like what Robert just detailed, capture that data into Mongo, and then reference it in your FileMaker solution directly. It's not a synchronization, it's a direct usage.
Switching topics a bit, because we're getting quite a few questions in this area about licensing. So with the current licensing we have today, anonymous data collection doesn't really fit with named users. Is there more insight you can provide?
We will need to solve that. Fully understand the problem. We'll need to solve
it. Swinging back, thanks, Pete. That's an elegant answer. Swinging back to the kind of technical details, can you talk more about scale? Where do you see the average and max load limits compared to WebDirect and what we have today?
Oh, we should be able to far surpass them. Far surpass them. I don't want to put specific numbers down, not until we understand all of the processing and data validation that we want to do, et cetera, and exactly how many data centers we want to drop around the planet. But the technologies that we're sitting on top of here are designed to scale. They're going to be massive overkill for smaller deployments. Scaling is not going to be our problem.
As part of the Claris, One Claris platform, does this new experience integrate with Claris Connect? Can you speak more about what that may look like?
Yeah, so we're still trying to work out the details there from a technical standpoint and from a licensing standpoint. Our CEO has made very, very, very clear that we need to remove bottlenecks to people using our stuff, or blockers to people using our stuff. So both on the licensing front and on the data connectivity front, things need to be much, much more seamless than they are. So Claris Connect is our workflow engine, our automation engine, and will continue to be it. So you can imagine in a solution like the one Robert just stood up, that upon receiving, submission of that registration, one might want to send out some emails and some Slack notifications, et cetera. I would expect to do all of that through Claris Connect. And so building those ties between this new stuff and Claris Connect is absolutely critical and part of the roadmap.
Going more technically under the hood, how much access will end users have to Mongo? Will they have the ability to read and write to that?
I don't know the answer to that. And I fully understand why they want to. Some of the things that we have to work through are, there's a lot of automagic that we can do the moment end user goes and changes the Mongo structure, or even changes the JavaScript structure the way Robert showed. We may not be able to auto flow things around those elements anymore. We may not be able to synchronize data back and forth between FileMaker appropriately. So we're going to have to figure out what sorts of changes we allow you to make, or whether there's a switch that you can flip that says, let me in, let me make changes, and then we shut down a bunch of automatic processes in response. We need to figure out where those boundaries are. Initially, we're planning on focusing on making this new stuff bulletproof and in addition to your FileMaker solution. So we're not as worried about allowing it to do anything and everything the way FileMaker needs to be able to. If you want to step out, outside the bounds of what new stuff supports, use FileMaker. As it matures, we're going to have to give you more and more and more complex controls. But the beauty of Robert's skateboard to car analogy too is we get to see how some people are using the skateboard. We get to see how some people are using the bicycle before we build the motorcycle. And that's going to really influence, where we let people into the system and where we let people tweak things. I think it's pretty clear. We don't have all the answers right now, and I think that's a good thing. We know what is necessary to build a skateboard, and we know what is necessary to build a skateboard that we can eventually build a bicycle on top of. And that's, where we are in the process right now.
Speaking of which, Pete, going to the skateboard and what we've seen today, we can call it a wheel or the skateboard in Robert's slide. When do we get to spin this wheel or ride the skateboard?
Some people are starting to play with it now. Very, very, very few people. Please don't just constantly hound Robert. That won't help you. So we're starting to get some feedback now. It's not a very compelling tool right now, and it doesn't integrate with FileMaker completely yet. So we've got those hurdles to get through over the coming months, but we are months, not years away. from having something that people can play with broadly, is what I would say.
Reviewing questions. Can you talk more about maybe some use cases that you have in mind? And maybe this question could be for Robert as well. You talked about the data collection app. What's next in your minds?
Go for it, Robert. I'm happy to jump in, but
Sure. Yeah, so this is just, as mentioned, one example. And there was another question that came in that I'll kind of touch on as well, because we talked about it just as doing the data collection. But can you actually view that data in the web browser? Is it just going to be reliant on going into FileMaker, right? So those are the most immediate next things that we're looking at, like how do you do this data collection and then take action on it within a web browser, be able to see the data that's coming in and start building things like, I think a dashboard was mentioned, and things of that nature. The other element of it is thinking about, okay, so what are the common patterns, right? You think about what we've done on FileMaker with sort of big monolithic solution templates. But how can we start off smaller and sort of give you building blocks, entity building blocks that get you, that cover a lot of the basic use cases that you can then stitch together easily. So those are a couple of the areas that we're looking at. I saw another question that I'll touch on here as well, because it was around, okay, this is some small thing, but will we ever be able to build custom applications on this like we can with FileMaker? And the answer to that is yes. That's where we're heading with this, is that you've got the tools necessary to build an entire experience in a web browser where it makes sense. So those are some of the things that we're thinking. But starting sort of from okay, if I'm trying to solve for data collection, what are the most immediate things that I would need next? And being able to view that data that you collected and start visualizing it in interesting ways, like a dashboard, are top of mind. Anything to add there, Pete?
no, I think that's good. I mean, we're playing with some other simplistic cases of being able to create everything that a school would need to run a school, for instance, and track teachers and classes and students and grades and lunch schedules and attendance and things of that nature, and just stitch together a pile of related data and show it, and being able to present it to students and teachers over the web, but also let parents have a portal where they see different portions of it. So, I expect that applications of that complexity are solvable relatively quickly here, to give you all a flavor of, what it's capable of soon.
And speaking of capabilities, can you go into some more detail of how this new experience supplements or lives alongside the existing WebDirect product in market?
Yeah, WebDirect was designed to replicate the feel of accessing a FileMaker solution through the desktop client, but on the web. And I understand that. That makes sense. But the desktop client is still a desktop client, and it lays Windows out the way you would expect a desktop window to be laid out, and WebDirect mirrors that. So it's really difficult to make solutions that automatically scale for an iPhone, an iPad, and a bigger iPad. WebDirect doesn't follow most modern web DOM HTML layout conventions. So this new stuff really is designed, at least the first iterations of it, for web consumption of content on the web. And we allow authoring through the new platform too, but its primary focus really is the consumption of forms, both data gathering and then eventually reporting, for deployment on the web, and doing a great job of that. So in some ways, it's still sitting right along WebDirect. In terms of properties that it starts encroaching on quickly, it'll start encroaching on WebDirect, and exactly what that means for the platform, we'll figure out together as we start seeing where this new stuff wants to grow and where its biggest value is initially. It's going to, I hope, be a tool that you would rather see your solutions deployed through on the web than WebDirect for a lot of different cases.
So related to that, you've mentioned how this new experience, new tool can fill a gap for Claris. Can you talk more about how it fills or addresses market needs?
Market needs is a really big term. Claris's market needs, our community's market needs, developers' market needs. As Robert talked about, by sitting on top of some really, really well battle-hardened standards, it should be an easier sell to a lot of IT departments. It should be faster to deploy new solutions on than the existing platform, as long as it actually supports what you want to be able to do there. It should be easier for newer developers to get going. So we hope to grow the developer community. We expect that if you are a new developer starting out on new stuff, you'll quickly hit some walls where you need to augment your solution with FileMaker. And so we expect to be able to take those new developers and build and run programs where we are actively funneling them off to community members to go help them perfect and grow and complete their solutions. So I know that's a long rambling answer, but it really depends on what market needs means in that question there, Wes.
Thanks, Pete. Going back to technical, can you talk more about performance and scaling, specifically with this new stuff, what it means for multi-region, CDN, sharding, how that all plays into scale and performance?
Well, we have the ability to actually support it now. That's how it plays in. And we haven't in the past. So day one, we're not going to leverage mongo sharding, but we have the ability to. It's a nice, eventually consistent backend if we want it to be. So I fully expect that one day there are solutions deployed that have 3-4 shards spanning the globe. You go and you make a transaction against one of them, and eventually that commit is rolled around the planet. And we will have to have infrastructure in place to handle collisions and things of that nature and make them available to your solutions. But the first iterations of new stuff don't need that sort of support to be really, really valuable.
And for the new stuff, what are some comparisons in record locking, updating, if you compare it to FileMaker today?
They're very different. At least out of the box, we're not locking. Not right now. And so it's not an ACID compliant backend, but that's also part of what allows you to drive much, much, much higher throughput through the system than we've ever been able to with a FileMaker backend before. And that means you have to think about application development differently. There was a question I responded to in the Q&A about achieving scale, and someone had said, hey, they heard that a file-backed backend was not as performant as a table-backed one in some cases, and that may be true in some very, very, very specific cases, but it's not true 99% of the time. Amazon runs on a file-backed backend, for instance, sharded across the planet. But also what it means when you're running against an eventually consistent backend is, if you're Amazon, you may sell a book that you don't actually have in inventory because you thought you had it in inventory when you sold it, and you found out a couple milliseconds later that you don't. And then you have to be able to roll that sale back. So there's a little bit of complexity that you need to manage when your backend runs out of an object. But 99% of the time, you don't have to handle that complexity and you don't have to be blocked. And so we will help teach the community to work against such a back end and to leverage the power that it brings.
And speaking of which, a lot of what we saw today, simple drag and drop, WYSIWYG type experience, and Robert gave some examples of how you can dig deeper. For your target personas, or are you targeting new developers? Is this really an experience or a platform that I can sink my teeth into and do custom development? Because it looks so simple.
It is super simple. And again, I'll go back to where I started. You have to view this platform as an adjunct to FileMaker, as something that you use alongside FileMaker. So as Robert said, if you wanted to build an anonymous data gathering portal with a FileMaker solution today, it's difficult. With this stuff, it's easy. That doesn't mean everything is easy on this platform. That doesn't mean that everything's better on this platform. There are going to be some things that this is a much, much better tuned platform for than FileMaker. And there'll be some things that you're much better off using FileMaker for right now. So use FileMaker. But use this alongside it when you've got web deployments that you want to scale with different resolutions and to look good, no matter what device they're pulled up on, and you don't want to have to deal with figuring out how to manage and create those layouts. Use this stuff. It'll be great.
Thanks, Pete, and thanks, Robert. Checking the time now. We'll wrap up our Q&A, and a big thank you to the audience for all the great questions. And with that, I'll hand it off to Janine to wrap us up.
Thanks, Wes.
Thanks, Wes. Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Robert. Really, really awesome to see and hear the open dialogue about what's coming next for the future of the platform. So thank you all. And with that, it is my pleasure to carry us forward through to the end here. And I want to remind everybody that we have another session coming up in just about 30 minutes, and we hope that you will join us. It's led by Vince Manano of Beeswax, and it will give you all of the insights that you are looking for around performance and the value and benefits of transactions. So we hope you'll join us for that. And then moving past November, as we get into December, we certainly don't want to miss the opportunity to recognize the excellence that has been delivered throughout the community over the course of the last year. And we will be recognizing award winners. You have done some amazing work and we want to celebrate it. We're taking a slightly different approach to the awards this year. It will be an ongoing campaign that celebrates the winners of the 2021 Excellence Awards starting in December. So it won't be a webinar, but there will be a series of content and celebrations recognizing the excellence throughout the community. We are so grateful for all that you continue to do for Claris and for each other. So stay tuned to the claris.com Engage landing page for more information as we are preparing to announce our winners in December, who will be recognized. You'll have to wait and see. And going forward, we're really busy making plans for a long-awaited reunion. And throughout Engage Beyond 2021, we have had a blast. Delivering this online series of content was new and exciting, and we've learned a lot. And thank you all so much for joining us every step of the way. But as 2021 wraps up, we're going to pause on Engage Beyond and shift our attention toward planning Claris Engage 2022. And this has been a great experience over the last several months. We're excited for what this series of content in this format means and how we may be able to leverage it in the future. But all this being said, what we really want is to be back together. We can't wait for it. So I'm excited to announce that we're really dedicating our focus as a team to planning an incredible, exciting, and not to be missed in-person event next year. We've really missed each other. And we believe we have a good chance of coming back together next summer. So we're committing to making Claris Engage 2022 the best reunion imaginable. And we hope you'll save the date, July 12th through the 14th in Nashville, Tennessee, at the Gaylord Opryland Resort and Convention Center. Mark your calendars and stay tuned for more announcements as we plan ahead. We cannot wait to welcome you back. So we hope you'll meet us in Music City for the reunion we've all been waiting for. And it's important to note that these events, virtual or otherwise, do not happen without your help. And we will be making a call for your speaker content and proposals for our event in Nashville. So be on the lookout for that. But I would be remiss if I didn't, on behalf of all of the team at Claris, recognize our speakers throughout Engage Beyond 2021. We are so grateful for your thought leadership, your expertise, your preparation, and sharing it with the community. Thank you, thank you, thank you to all of you. And one more special thank you before we wrap. Some of you may know that we have assembled a committee of thought leaders and experts and diverse community members from around the world to help us and provide feedback as we've been planning for these events, both for Engage Beyond, and we will continue to gather feedback from the committee moving forward as we plan Engage 2022. This committee has devoted time, energy, thoughts, advocacy on behalf of the entire community, and has helped us to craft events that have the community's best interest at the center of everything we've planned. And I really wanted to take a moment and thank them for their dedication and their advocacy. The committee was led by our own Britta Rock and Kim Carlson of Direct Impact as co-chairs, but the entire committee is made up of the following: Mike Berge, Vanessa Costanzo, Wei Hao Ding, Chrissy Ferris, Jeremy Rankin, Chris Snipe, Koen Van Hoel, and Kate Waldhauser. So thank you all so much for your dedication and for advocating on behalf of the entire community. We look forward to continuing working with you and getting more insights as we go forward. And as we finally wrap, again, we really appreciate your insights and feedback on today's session. Please remember to complete the survey. The survey link is in the chat. And don't forget that your topic suggestions will help as we plan for Claris Engage 2022. And with that, it has been my pleasure to be your host today, and I look forward to seeing you at a future event and hopefully seeing you in person in Nashville next summer. Take care, everyone.